Okay. Try not to make this as bright as possible. No. I don't want to make it that bright. Sorry. I should have prepped this a little bit sooner. Okay. I guess it's not going to let me. Okay. I recently came across a tweet that made me think more about this idea of porn. The the tweet that gave me a lot of thought was, I believe the woman typed. She said something like, all males that watch porn are beta, something like that. Which for me, there's already two problems. Problems in the sense that there's already a popular culture in male. It's weird. There is like this male psychology that is not really an official psychology, but it is a cultural psychology of male types. But what's interesting is that more and more arise. I think like the newest one was Sigma or something, right? It used to be Alpha, Beta, now there's Sigma. But anyways, that was just one of my gripes about this sort of it's a construction, right? It's an after the fact um, construction. But the when she was talking about porn, she talked about porn as the problem. And I had to ask myself this question because I don't think a lot of us ask this question, at least as often as I think we should. Is that porn? Like, what is porn exactly? And where does I want to I don't want to what I want to problematize is uh, porn itself in the sense of what is it? What is porn in itself? And this is something that I find very tricky because if we take a sort of general function or a general function of porn, you could say it is a spectator type of stimulus, right? It is a means, is a kind of material used or viewed um, to arouse or achieve pleasure, satisfaction, pleasure. But if we take this general statement of it is a sort of viewing stimulus for to achieve pleasure, right? If we broaden that out, then then there's a lot of things that are porn, you know. Even the idea of, I mean, you see this in our culture today, right? Hashtag food porn, right? Hashtag food porn. Uh, so it seems like we can't just make a. It's not quite clear what exactly porn is. It's not clear because if we take that general statement, right? If I generalize what porn is, right, that it's a sort of viewing uh, stimulus, uh, something to be viewed to stimulate and in the for the means to achieve pleasure, then I mean you could say watching a football game is almost the same thing. Um, Seeing, you know, going shopping, going shopping, it would be almost the same thing, right? except porn would be like, depending if you pay for it or not, you'd be like, well, I'm not buying today, so I can't afford it, so I'm just going to look, right? You see people doing this all the time in stores, right? They just like looking at books or feeling the books, and gives them a sort of pleasure. But you could say the ultimate pleasure would be to buy the book. Um, Now, a lot of the problems that people speak about for porn, they say things like, um, it's not. I mean, it's not real, right? It's not real, so it displaces men's reality, and they start viewing women as objects. But see, this kind of reproach um, isn't adequate, in the sense that, I mean, we have to really trace back exactly, if we're going to say, well, it distorts men's reality of women. I mean, I don't think I need to be a historian here, um, to point out that there was points in history before technology was developed, uh, where men already viewed women as objects. So this 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 thing is really, um, it's really strange when we talk about this idea of porn, because a lot of the critiques of porn, again, it says, a lot of the critiques that I've heard, at least, is that, okay, so one, it displaces men's reality of how they view women and sex. It treats the woman as objects, but historically, right, um, women were viewed as property, right, before women had rights. Um, and if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure in history, in the past, that if you were married, if you were the wife, if you had a wife, if you were a man and you had a wife, there's really no notions of consent in that sense. Um, so it's, again, like, the, I feel like that specific critique of porn isn't something that is new, because it can be applied to a lot of other things, um, along the history of men and women, right? Of women slowly, of women gaining rights and so on. So I feel like that critique isn't up to par in terms of being a critique against porn. The other critique was, I believe I've heard it a critique as something like, oh, men would rather watch porn than have sexual relations. I don't I don't see this either as something new, um, in terms of, for example, prostitution. Prostitution, we can say, was where men had sex and preferred no relations, right? So you could say, but the idea now that, but this is still, you could say, a physical pleasure. Now, if we want to critique against physical pleasure or viewing pleasure, then perhaps there's a distinguishment there, but it isn't. Again, it isn't really clear to me the critique. Now, some of the other things about, I think another critique was about the variety of porn that is available. That might be something there. So you could say porn in terms of the internet porn that we have now uh, opens the door wide open. Like it literally, there's so much variety, right? And a common thing that people say is they will say that porn, like the more you watch porn, you'll get into more and more different things, right? You'll find yourself watching more and more unusual things to get yourself off. I I cannot say. I mean, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know how much of that is actually true, but it seems like this is a, a generalization that is a little dangerous here, because I've heard a variety of men's responses in terms of, some men, they just do it just to, just have a sexual release and go on about their day. And then there's some men that use it in the way that people critique it as, and then there's some men that, do um, whatever sorts with it. So um, with these variety of, if we accept the premise of that there is a variety of uses, or men use porn or view porn in a variety of ways to achieve a variety of things, um, is porn the problem? Because it would seem like for me, porn is more of a tool to achieve. Now you could say that the problem is how it's been advertised to be used, or you can say the problem is not the tool itself, but why the user uses the tool in that way. And I think this is why I have a problem with behavioralist psychology, because, you know, a behaviorist psychology is always going to, at least from my understanding, is always going to say that the porn is the problem. And again, this gets into even the debate about addiction and predisposition and everything else, because, I mean, I truly don't believe when we're assessing this that porn is a cause. My suspicion is that porn is a sort of material, a tool used to achieve or stimulate a release, a sexual release, or achieve some satisfaction. Uh, but what is interesting, you could say, is why the user prefers that tool for sexual release rather than uh, other things. And what's interesting about this topic is that it seems like when people critique porn, very few people talk about masturbation in some sense. I don't know why that's not connected. And also, in my experience, when I've talked to men over the years of this topic, men are more, it seems, at least from my experience, it seems that men are more visual, uh, like to use material that is visual, like to have material for imagination to stimulate the pleasure, right? To achieve the pleasure, to achieve the sexual release. And we can this goes back to like Playboy, before like porn, before you have the porn we have today. So it's, I mean, even you could say even the old form of porn is what, the peeping toms, right? The peeping tom. So I don't see it. It just isn't clear to me when we talk about what is porn, because I would probably say the most ancient form of porn was probably the pervert that would sneak in to watch women naked in the bathroom or something, or the peeping tom, right? That those are some of the most old forms of, you could say, those are the oldest forms of porn watching. So uh, I'm really at a loss for words when we talk about um, what is porn. But you could say that the peeping tom was restricted because of physical environment and so on, and time and place. But now porn, because of technology, um, you can peeping tom all you want, right? You can be the spectator, the gaze, right? um, and that's not meant to refer to a Lacanian. It's not. It's not the gaze in the Lacanian sense, by the way. But I am borrowing that term, the gaze. Um, but yeah, I think that's. And then there's all these talk about porn will cause erectile dysfunction and so on. But I feel like there's a missing factor there. And again, that has to do with masturbation. And you know, again, when we talk about history, it seems a lot of the critiques about porn isn't something new in terms of uh, the lines of thought that I shared historically. Is it? Yeah. I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel like I feel like that was a decent point about the peeping tom. That was probably the most ancient form of pornography. So, um, so yeah, I don't. I mean, it's again, technology only. We could say the behavior, right? The peeping toms, the behavior has always existed. Um, Now it's interesting if we take the notion of peeping tom, right? Perhaps now this is strictly hypothetical, but perhaps what we're seeing today is somewhat of uh, nature in terms of, my suspicion is that peeping toms were probably few because of physical environment, timing, so on, everything, right? Probably a little bit too difficult um, to make that a constant for yourself. If we're talking about peeping tom in that sense, but and so I can imagine people thinking, "Oh, that's too difficult to do, right? That's just too much effort, too much time to wait, to plan, and to arrive, to see the thing that you want to see." But because of porn now, because it's so through the internet, because it's available now, it's access. Access is just right there. It's easy. So that means everybody can be a peeping tom if they want to be. Um, and so it moves it closer in proximity to everyone else. But again, that you could say that's again that wouldn't be a critique of what porn itself, because that would be a critique of technology. But then that's not really a critique of technologies in some sense, because a lot of people like the convenience. You could say the one thing that's bad about porn is that it's just become more convenient. If we're accepting the points that I presented, that peeping tom is perhaps the most ancient form, porn watching, um, that actually the function itself of peeping tomming, whatever you want to call it, uh, sneaking a peek, uh, technology has only made it more accessible, and so porn is a consequence of technology, right? Where it allows everybody to be a peeping tom in their own homes, right? It sort of reminds me like, it's funny because, back then, right, you hear stories about people like have binoculars in their house, um, and would peep into people's houses, right? Try to see them naked. Um, so again, now the one factor is that you could say that there is conscious actors in the porn making, meaning like they know they are doing a performance for someone else. Now that, I think, is perhaps the one distinction I can find, is that in comparison to the peeping tom example, the the woman being peeped at um, isn't a conscious performer for someone else. She's just going about her day. Uh, so now that might add something, but at the same time, uh, mm, you know, so it's interesting, right? Because if we compare my notion of the more ancient form of the peeping tom, right? The peeping tom has no power, no delegation to what he chooses to see or what he is peeping at, right? What the like the person that he's peeping at, he doesn't delegate or he doesn't get to pick exactly what they're going to do. Um, but in porn, there is always a delegation, sort of a description about what is going to be seen, right? What is going to be watched. So in that sense, but so you could say it gives the viewer it gives the viewer a false sense of uh, potency, right? It gives a viewer a false sense of power over my uh, imaginations, power over my fantasies, right? Where the peeper didn't really have power over his fantasies. The fantasy was sort of being constructed as he viewed it. Um, I, I'm trying to, still, I don't believe we're really at the the crux of what is porn because, again, this notion of variety, more access, this is just a consequence of technology. So I don't I feel like it's very difficult when we're talking about exactly what is porn. This really gets difficult um, because we can't just talk about, well, it's just something you watch where people have sex. Uh, yes, but what is so distinct about that in terms of aim, right? If you're talking about the aim is for pleasure, then there's many things that we do for pleasure. There's many things that we watch for pleasure. Um, so again, it isn't very clear exactly what porn is. And so even though people say it's a problem, I want to problematize exactly what is the problem, right? Before we say it's a problem, I don't know what we're talking about. uh, like I know what we're talking about in the culturally accepted sense, but I don't know what we're talking about philosophically. Because philosophically, it seems like it can be applied to a lot of things. And the more that I describe it, the less and less it can be distinguished as solely the porn that we culturally accept as today. And that's about it for my problematia. Yeah, that's it. That was a lot of the reflections I was thinking about today. So, all right, guys, take care.